March 6, 1944. High above Germany, at a frigid 23,000 feet, a B-17 flying fortress christened Hell's Fury sliced through enemy skies. In the vulnerable tail gunner position, Staff Sergeant Michael "Mad Mike" Donovan, a South Boston native with a chip on his shoulder and ice in his veins, was scanning the horizon when he spotted them. 12 Messerschmitt Bf 109s, sleek and deadly, forming up for an attack run like a pack of wolves closing in for the kill. Standard operating procedure dictated a defensive posture. Hunker down, conserve ammunition, and pray for the best. Training manuals preached controlled bursts and calculated risk. Common sense screamed, "Stay alive!" But Donovan wasn't a man for standard operating procedure, or common sense for that matter. He saw not a threat, but an opportunity. In the next 4 heart-stopping minutes, a dozen German fighters would plummet from the sky, leaving fiery trails against the backdrop of the German landscape. Not a single American life would be lost. And every bomber gunner in the 8th Air Force would learn a new word, a concept previously relegated to the realm of fighter aces: aggression. This is the story of how one tail gunner's seemingly suicidal tactic, born of desperation and a fierce will to live, rewrote the rules of aerial combat. How a position considered the most dangerous on a B-17 became, in the blink of an eye, the deadliest weapon in the sky. This is the legend of Mad Mike Donovan. Michael Donovan's formative years were spent in the rough-and-tumble streets of South Boston, where survival was a daily battle, and only the strong survived. His father, a longshoreman with calloused hands and a weary spirit, toiled on the docks. His older brother, a bruiser with a knockout punch, fought his way through the Golden Gloves circuit. Mike learned early on that hesitation was a luxury he couldn't afford. Waiting meant getting hurt. Action kept you breathing. By the tender age of 17, he'd already participated in 32 street brawls, winning all but 4. He'd simply started too late. When the news of Pearl Harbor echoed across the nation, Donovan was among the first to enlist, eager to trade the alleyways of Southie for the skies above Europe. The Army Air Forces initially wanted him for ground crew, figuring his brawling skills were better suited to fixing planes than shooting them down. But Donovan, with his unwavering determination, insisted on gunnery school. The instructors, seasoned veterans of countless missions, found him to be too aggressive, too reckless, too willing to expose himself to enemy fire. Donovan's response, delivered with a granite jaw and a defiant glint in his eyes, became legendary at gunnery school. Dead gunners don't shoot back. Live ones do. He graduated 3rd in his class, not because of pinpoint accuracy, but because of sheer, unadulterated speed. Donovan could acquire targets faster than anyone they trained. His secret was brutally simple. He didn't wait for enemy fighters to enter his designated firing zone. He hunted them, stalked them, engaged them before they even had a chance to line up their sights. In March of 1944, Donovan was transferred to the 390th Bombardment Group, stationed in Framlingham, England. His assigned B-17, Hell's Fury, already possessed a less than enviable reputation. 3 missions, 2 near-catastrophic encounters with swarms of German fighters. The previous tail gunner, Sergeant Logan Reed, had miraculously survived, but immediately requested a transfer. He confided in the crew chief, his voice laced with fear. "That position's cursed. Next man dies there." Donovan, of course, volunteered immediately. The pilot, Captain James Whitmore, a man known for his level-headedness and calm demeanor under pressure, interviewed him personally. "You know the statistics, Donovan?" Whitmore asked, his voice grave. "The tail gunner position has the highest casualty rate. 38% don't finish their tour." "Then I've got 62% odds," Donovan replied, his voice unwavering. "I'll take them." "Why?" Whitmore pressed, suspicion in his eyes. "Because I don't wait for them to shoot me," Donovan said, his gaze locked on the captain's. "I shoot first." Whitmore studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of doubt. Finally, he nodded, a grudging respect creeping into his expression. "You're insane, Donovan. You'll fit right in." Donovan's first mission aboard Hell's Fury took place on March 2, 1944. The target? a vital ball-bearing factory in Schweinfurt, a place notoriously defended by the Luftwaffe's finest. He shot down one Bf-109 and damaged two more. But it wasn't just his kills that caught the attention of the crew. It was his method. Standard tail gunner tactics were predicated on defensive fire. Wait for fighters to commit to attack runs, open fire only when they entered effective range, conserve ammunition at all costs, protect the aircraft. Donovan did the exact opposite. He unleashed controlled bursts at fighters still forming up, forcing them to break formation prematurely. He seemingly wasted precious ammunition on targets at extreme range. His logic, however, was unassailable. One burst of 20 rounds at 800 yards might seem wasteful, but one fighter breaking its attack pattern could potentially save 10,000 pounds of aircraft and 9 precious lives. The math, as Donovan saw it, clearly worked in his favor. His second mission, on March 4th, targeted another heavily defended factory. This time, Donovan experimented further. When a flight of Bf-109s initiated their attack run from 6 o'clock high, he didn't track the lead fighter, the obvious threat. Instead, he targeted the second one, the wingman, the one least expecting return fire, the one flying a predictable pattern to maintain formation. The wingman erupted in a spectacular explosion. The lead fighter, suddenly alone and exposed, broke off his attack immediately. The entire attack run disintegrated into chaos. Donovan's crew chief, Sergeant Jason Clark, a man known for his meticulous attention to detail, counted the spent ammunition after they landed. "You fired 1,600 rounds, Donovan," he exclaimed, his voice incredulous. "Standard load is 2,000. You used 80% of your ammo on one mission." "And we didn't get hit, Sarge," Donovan replied, a smug grin spreading across his face. "I'll take that trade every day." But Donovan wasn't satisfied. He'd successfully prevented attacks, disrupted enemy formations, but he knew he hadn't yet maximized his effectiveness. That night in the barracks, under the dim glow of a single light bulb, he meticulously studied German fighter tactics, analyzing their approach patterns, their preferred positioning, their likely expectations. German fighters, he realized, typically attacked bombers in coordinated waves. The standard pattern involved 4 to 6 fighters in echelon formation, approaching from the stern quarter high. The lead fighter drew the defensive fire, while the wingman exploited the gunner's tunnel vision, capitalizing on their focus on the primary threat. The standard American response was to track the lead threat, engage only when certain of a hit, and conserve ammunition for subsequent attacks. Donovan saw the fatal flaw in this approach. American gunners reacted, while the Germans dictated the terms of engagement. The initiative invariably belonged to the attacker. Every defensive doctrine, he realized, implicitly assumed that the enemy controlled the timing of the engagement. What if you reversed it? What if you attacked first, forcing the enemy to react to your actions, throwing their carefully laid plans into disarray? March 6th, 1944. Permission briefing. The target? A critical aircraft factory in Augsburg, a vital cog in the German war machine. Intelligence reports painted a grim picture. Over 800 B-17s were expected to participate in the raid, and upwards of 2,500 German fighters were anticipated to defend the target. Intelligence predicted heavy losses. Whitmore gathered his crew around a battered table in the briefing room, his expression grim. "This one's going to be rough, gentlemen," he warned, his voice low and serious. "Stay sharp. Stay alive." Donovan raised his hand, his eyes gleaming with a barely suppressed energy. "Permission to try something different, sir?" Whitmore frowned, a hint of weariness in his voice. "Like what, Donovan?" "Aggressive fire, sir," Donovan explained, his voice ringing with conviction. "I want to engage enemy fighters before they commit to their attack runs, force them to defend before they have a chance to attack us." Whitmore's frown deepened. "That burns ammunition, Donovan. You'll be dry before the real fight even begins." "Or I'll prevent the real fight from happening altogether," Donovan countered, his gaze unwavering. "Sir, we've been playing defense for 2 years. How's that been working out for us? 38% tail gunner casualty rate. Maybe it's time we stopped waiting to get shot." The pilot considered Donovan's words, weighing the potential risks and rewards. Finally, he nodded, a reluctant agreement in his eyes. "You've got one mission to prove it, Donovan. One mission. If we get shredded out there, you're off the guns. Deal?" "Deal," Donovan affirmed, his voice sharp and confident. They took off at 0647 hours, the roar of the engines a deafening symphony of power and purpose. Formation assembly over East Anglia was precise and methodical. They climbed steadily to altitude, the air growing colder and thinner with each passing minute. They crossed the English Channel, the white cliffs of Dover fading into the distance behind them. They entered German airspace at 0824, the routine feeling almost mechanical, a grim dance they had performed countless times before. Then at 0919, the call came crackling over the intercom like a death knell. "Fighters, 6 o'clock high, 12 bandits!" Donovan swiveled his twin .50 caliber machine guns, his senses sharpening, his focus narrowing. 12 Bf 109s, sleek and predatory, were positioned 2,000 yards out, meticulously forming up for a coordinated attack. The standard response was ingrained in every gunner's mind. Wait until they commit to their attack run, then engage the lead fighter conserving ammunition for multiple passes. Donovan, however, did neither. He opened fire immediately, unleashing a torrent of lead at a seemingly impossible range of 2,000 yards. Maximum range, minimal probability of a direct hit. The tracers arced through the vast expanse of empty sky, most missing their intended targets by hundreds of feet. But the effect was immediate and undeniable. The German formations scattered like startled birds, their carefully orchestrated attack run thrown into disarray. The lead fighter veered sharply to the right, its pilot clearly unnerved by the unexpected barrage. The wingmen hesitated, their movements faltering, their confidence shaken. The meticulously planned attack pattern disintegrated before it even had a chance to materialize. "Donovan, cease fire!" Whitmore's voice crackled urgently over the intercom. "You're wasting ammunition!" "Negative, sir," Donovan replied, his voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Watch what happens next." The German fighters, though momentarily disoriented, regrouped, their pilots determined to press their attack. But now, their approach was markedly more cautious, lacking the aggressive diving attack pattern they had initially intended. They were hesitant, probing, clearly wary of the madman lurking in the tailgun position. The initiative, against all odds, had shifted. Donovan tracked the new lead fighter, his finger hovering over the triggers. He waited until the range closed to 1,500 yards, then unleashed another burst of controlled fire, not necessarily aiming to destroy, but primarily aiming to intimidate. It worked. The formation broke again, the German pilots clearly reluctant to commit to a full frontal assault. However, 1 Bf 109, the wingman on the left, maintained its course, its pilot displaying an unnerving level of aggression and experience. Donovan recognized the type instantly. A veteran pilot, someone who wouldn't be easily intimidated, someone who required different tactics. He allowed the fighter to close, the distance shrinking rapidly. 1,400 yards, 1,300, 1,200, the range where most gunners would open sustained fire, unleashing everything they had. Donovan held his fire, his nerves of steel unwavering. He allowed the German fighter to close even further. 1,100 yards, 1,000. Now the fighter filled his sights, a menacing silhouette against the azure sky. Donovan finally fired. Not a short burst, not a measured stream of bullets, but a sustained, unrelenting barrage. 200 rounds in a blistering 3 seconds. The sheer concentration of firepower was overwhelming, a wall of lead that no aircraft could withstand. The Bf 109 pilot, caught completely off guard, desperately tried to break off his attack, but he was too late. He flew directly into the heart of Donovan's relentless stream of tracers. The aircraft's engine exploded in a deafening roar, showering the sky with debris. The fighter disintegrated in a spectacular display of destruction, its pieces tumbling earthward like fallen stars. "Good kill!" the radio operator exclaimed, his voice filled with awe. "Donovan just splashed one!" But Donovan wasn't celebrating. He was already tracking his next target, his mind focused solely on the task at hand. The remaining 11 fighters had regrouped, their pilots now fully aware that the tail position of Hell's Fury was anything but defenseless. They would undoubtedly adjust their tactics, approaching from different angles, attempting to split his attention, hoping to overwhelm him with a coordinated assault. This, Donovan knew, was the standard counter to aggressive defense. He had anticipated this, planned for it. When the German fighters split into two distinct groups, 6 attacking from 6 o'clock and 5 attacking from 7 o'clock, he didn't try to engage both simultaneously, a common mistake that often proved fatal. Instead, he focused every ounce of his concentration and every round of ammunition on the 6 o'clock group, completely ignoring the threat posed by the fighters approaching from 7 o'clock. "Waist gunners!" Donovan barked over the intercom, his voice sharp and commanding. "You've got 7 o'clock. I'm holding 6. The waist gunners, Sergeants Dylan Brooks and Mason Ward, seasoned veterans in their own right, responded instantly, unleashing a furious barrage of fire on the fighters approaching from 7 o'clock. Donovan, meanwhile, remained laser-focused on his designated sector. 6 fighters diving directly toward them, their machine guns blazing. He picked out the lead aircraft, the most aggressive and determined of the bunch. He fired, his aim precise, his timing impeccable. Hit! The fighter exploded in a blinding flash of light, its burning wreckage spiraling out of control. The remaining 5 fighters, momentarily stunned by the sudden loss of their leader, broke formation. Donovan immediately shifted his fire to the new lead fighter, his reflexes honed to a razor's edge. He fired again, another hit, another explosion. In a mere 30 seconds, 3 Bf-109s had been reduced to smoldering wreckage, plummeting towards the earth. The remaining 9 fighters, their morale shattered and their confidence shaken, broke off their attack completely, not even attempting to reposition for another pass. They were in full retreat, fleeing from the relentless fire of a single tailgun position. The B-17 formation flew on, leaving the chaos and destruction behind them. Donovan reloaded his guns, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. He checked his ammunition supply, calculating his remaining firepower. He had expended approximately 1,200 rounds, leaving him with 800 remaining. Enough for 1 more sustained engagement or 2 brief, carefully controlled bursts. The burning question, of course, was whether the Germans would return. They did. 15 minutes later, a much larger force appeared on the horizon. 18 fighters, a full staffel, emboldened by their numbers and determined to avenge their fallen comrades. They had undoubtedly witnessed the fate of the first group and had undoubtedly adjusted their tactics accordingly. They attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously, attempting to overwhelm Donovan with a relentless barrage of firepower from every stern quarter. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. The sky was filled with the ominous drone of engines and the staccato rattle of machine gun fire. The standard response in this situation was to revert to defensive fire, attempting to cover all angles, dividing attention in a desperate attempt to survive through evasion and sheer dumb luck. Donovan, however, chose violence. He ignored the fighters attacking from 4 and 5 o'clock, leaving them to the capable hands of the waist and ball turret gunners. He focused every ounce of his being, every fiber of his concentration, on the 6 o'clock attack, the direct stern assault that posed the most immediate and catastrophic threat. 6 Bf-109s dove straight at Hell's Fury's tail, their machine guns spitting fire. Donovan didn't flinch, didn't try to evade, didn't even hesitate. He locked his guns on the lead fighter, his aim unwavering, and opened fire at 1,200 yards, the absolute maximum effective range for his twin 50-caliber machine guns. The closing speed between the bomber and the fighters was approximately 400 knots. A terrifying convergence that left Donovan with exactly 7 seconds before the lead German fighter reached its ideal firing position. Donovan used every single one of those 7 seconds. He walked the tracers directly into the lead Bf-109's flight path, creating a deadly gauntlet of lead that the German pilot couldn't avoid without breaking his carefully planned attack formation. The pilot, displaying a remarkable, perhaps even suicidal level of determination, held his course. Fatal mistake. At 800 yards, Donovan's rounds found their mark, ripping through the German fighter's airframe with devastating force. The aircraft's canopy shattered, sending shards of plexiglass into the cockpit. The fighter rolled violently inverted, its engines sputtering, and plummeted towards the earth in a fiery death spiral. 5 fighters remaining. Now, only 400 yards separated them from Hell's Fury, a distance that closed with terrifying speed. 3 seconds to impact. Donovan shifted his aim to the next fighter, his movements lightning fast. There was no time to track the target properly, no time for careful calculation. Pure instinct took over, guiding his hand, dictating his aim. He fired where the target would be in 2 seconds, not where it currently was. He fired based on a complex calculation of trajectory, velocity, and the unforgiving laws of physics. The second Bf-109 flew directly into Donovan's relentless stream of bullets, taking catastrophic damage to its engine cowling. The fighter erupted in a ball of orange flame, its wreckage scattering across the sky like morbid confetti. The 3 remaining fighters, their nerves shattered and their confidence evaporated, broke formation immediately, not even considering repositioning for another pass. They were in full defensive maneuvers, desperately fleeing from the seemingly invincible tailgun position. "Jesus Christ!" Whitmore's voice crackled over the intercom, his tone a mixture of disbelief and sheer awe. Donovan just splashed 2 more in 3 seconds. But Donovan wasn't celebrating. He was reloading, his movements economical and precise. He reached for his last ammunition belt, the final 400 rounds that stood between him and potential annihilation. The mission, however, was only half over. They still had to reach the target, drop their bombs, and somehow, against all odds, fly home through the same fighter-infested airspace. The formation continued its relentless push towards Augsburg, the flak cannons on the ground now adding their thunderous voices to the cacophony of war. German fighters regrouped at a safe distance, their pilots licking their wounds and reassessing their strategy. 12 aircraft remained from the original 18, a testament to Donovan's deadly accuracy. They had learned a painful lesson. Direct stern attacks against Hell's Fury were simply too costly. They needed different tactics, something more subtle, something less suicidal. What came next, however, surprised everyone. The German fighters didn't attack. Instead, they shadowed the bomber formation, staying just outside of effective gun range, patiently waiting, their intentions unclear. Whitmore recognized the pattern immediately, his experience reading the enemy's intentions like an open book. "They're calling in reinforcements," he warned, his voice tight with tension. "We're about to get hit by everything they've got." He was right. 10 minutes later, radar picked up a swarm of new contacts closing in fast. 36 fighters, a full Gruppe, comprised of 3 Staffeln of Bf-109s and FW-190s, were bearing down on them. Combined with the 12 fighters already shadowing them, Hell's Fury faced a staggering 48 enemy fighters against a single B-17's defensive armament. Standard procedure in this dire situation was to radio for fighter escort, tighten formation with nearby bombers to maximize overlapping defensive fire, and desperately try to survive through sheer coordination and a healthy dose of luck. But Hell's Fury had drifted slightly from the main formation during the earlier attacks, leaving them dangerously exposed. The nearest friendly bomber was a seemingly insurmountable 3 miles away. No P-51 Mustang fighter escorts were within radio range. They were alone. Donovan checked his ammunition supply. 380 rounds against 48 enemy fighters. The math, by any reasonable calculation, simply didn't work. Unless, of course, he changed the equation. "Captain," Donovan called over the intercom, his voice remarkably calm considering their precarious situation. "Permission to try something." "What, Donovan?" Whitmore asked, his voice carefully controlled, betraying only a hint of the tension he must have been feeling. "Attack," Donovan replied, his voice unwavering. A moment of stunned silence hung in the air. Then, Whitmore's voice, carefully modulated, crackled over the intercom. "Explain, Donovan." "Those fighters are forming up for a coordinated assault, sir," Donovan explained, his words measured and precise. "Give them 2 minutes, and they'll hit us from every angle simultaneously. We can't effectively defend against that, but we can disrupt it. If I engage while they're still organizing, I can force them to scatter before they're ready." "You'll be out of ammunition in 30 seconds, Donovan," Whitmore pointed out, stating the obvious. "Then I better make those 30 seconds count," Donovan retorted, his voice grimly determined. "Sir, defensive tactics don't work when you're outnumbered 20 to 1. Our only chance is aggressive action, striking while they're still vulnerable. Whitmore considered Donovan's words for a long 3 seconds, a lifetime in the context of aerial combat. Then he made his decision, trusting his gut, trusting his gunner. "Do it, Donovan," he commanded, his voice tight with a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. "But if you get us killed, I'm writing your family a very angry letter." Donovan didn't waste time responding. The German formation was positioned approximately 2,000 yards out, still in the crucial stages of organization. Lead elements were carefully establishing attack vectors, while trailing elements were meticulously moving into support positions. They were in a state of perfect vulnerability. Donovan opened fire. Not short, controlled bursts. Not suppressive fire intended to harass and intimidate. He unleashed a maximum, sustained barrage, pouring 200 rounds into the very center of the formation in a blistering 8 seconds. He wasn't targeting specific aircraft. His aim was far more ambitious than that. He was targeting the space where coordination happened, the ethereal nexus where fighters maintained formation discipline and communicated their intentions. The effect was immediate, catastrophic, and utterly devastating. Tracers crisscrossed through the formation's core, ripping through metal and flesh. One Bf-109 caught fire instantly, its pilot trapped inside as it spiraled down in a screaming inferno. 2 other fighters, caught completely off guard, collided violently while desperately trying to evade Donovan's relentless hail of bullets. The entire formation disintegrated into complete and utter chaos. 48 fighters, once a unified force, scattered in every conceivable direction, their carefully laid plans abandoned, their discipline shattered. There was no coordination, no attack plan, just individual aircraft desperately trying to survive. "Holy," Whitmore began, his voice trailing off, unable to fully articulate the sheer audacity of what he had just witnessed. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone on board Hell's Fury saw it. One lone tail gunner, armed with a seemingly suicidal attack run, had just single-handedly broken up the largest fighter assault any of them had ever witnessed. But Donovan knew the truth. He had bought them time. Precious minutes that could mean the difference between life and death. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. The Germans would regroup, their pilots enraged and humiliated by their earlier defeat. The next attack would come fast, furious, and even more relentless than before. And he had only 180 rounds left. The German fighters regrouped faster than Donovan had anticipated, their pilots fueled by a potent mixture of anger and a burning desire for revenge. 90 seconds. That was all it took for them to reform their ranks and prepare for another assault. This time, they abandoned any pretense of coordinated tactics, opting instead for a brutal, overwhelming swarm attack. 12 fighters dove towards Hell's Fury from 6 o'clock simultaneously, their machine guns blazing, their intentions clear. There was no formation, no strategy, just pure, unadulterated violence. Donovan picked his targets carefully, his mind racing, his senses razor-sharp. He didn't target the closest fighters, the ones that posed the most immediate threat. He didn't target the most aggressive, the ones that seemed the most determined to destroy him. Instead, he targeted the middle of the swarm, the psychological center where the pack's courage came from, the crucial element that held the entire formation together. He fired short, controlled bursts, precisely timed and expertly aimed into 3 consecutive aircraft, each burst lasting only a fraction of a second. All 3 fighters took direct hits. One exploded in a blinding flash of light, its wreckage raining down through the sky. The other 2 broke off their attack, trailing thick plumes of black smoke, their engines crippled and their pilots undoubtedly injured. The remaining 9 fighters, undeterred by the carnage around them, continued their suicidal attack run, now within a mere 400 yards of Hell's Fury's tail section. Cannon fire lit up the sky like a macabre fireworks display. 20-millimeter rounds streaked past Hell's Fury's tail section, their trajectories a terrifying reminder of their vulnerability. Some of the rounds connected, tearing through the bomber's aluminum skin with brutal force. Metal shrieked, hydraulic lines ruptured, and the entire aircraft shuddered violently. But Donovan kept firing, his focus unwavering, his determination absolute. Target, burst. Target, burst. The movements were mechanical, almost detached, a testament to his training and his unwavering resolve. There was no fear, no hesitation, only the relentless pursuit of his deadly mission. Another Bf-109 fell, its engine exploding in a fiery inferno. Then another, its wings tearing off as it plummeted towards the earth. 5 fighters remaining, 200 yards, point-blank range. Donovan could see the pilots' faces now. Young men, barely out of their teens, their expressions a mixture of determination and fear. They were professional soldiers, they were doing their duty, and they were coming to kill him. He shot them anyway. 2 more fighters exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. 3 left, 100 yards. The survivors, their nerves shattered and their senses overwhelmed, finally broke off their attack, realizing that the risk of collision now far exceeded the potential reward of a kill. Donovan tracked one last fighter, his finger instinctively squeezing the triggers of his twin .50 caliber machine guns. Nothing happened. He squeezed again. Still nothing. The guns were empty. He had expended every single round of ammunition. 180 rounds in a mere 45 seconds. 6 fighters destroyed in that engagement alone. But now he was defenseless. "I'm out," Donovan called over the intercom, his voice surprisingly calm. "Dry on all guns." "Copy, Donovan," Whitmore responded, his voice strained but steady. "Damage report. Anyone hit?" The crew checked in, their voices filled with a mixture of relief and trepidation. The ball turret had sustained minor damage. The rudder showed stress fractures and a ruptured hydraulic line, but miraculously everyone was alive. All systems were functional, despite the battering they had just endured. Hell's Fury could still fly, could still fight, just without her tail guns. The German fighters knew it. They had undoubtedly observed the absence of defensive fire and quickly realized that the tail position had been effectively neutralized. They regrouped one final time, their pilots fueled by a potent mixture of anger and a desperate desire for vengeance. 27 aircraft remained from the original 48. They had lost 21 fighters to a single bomber, to a single gun position. The loss rate was catastrophic, unsustainable. But they now had one critical advantage. The tail position of Hell's Fury was completely and utterly defenseless. They attacked from directly astern, 6 o'clock low, the one vector that Donovan's empty guns couldn't possibly cover. This was a standard tactic when you knew the enemy was completely defenseless. This was execution. They came in tight formation, slow, methodical, their movements deliberate and precise. There would be no wasted shots, no missed opportunities. This was a carefully planned execution, a swift and merciless end to the seemingly unstoppable terror that had haunted the skies above Augsburg. Donovan watched them approach, his heart pounding in his chest. 400 yards, 300, 200. He had no ammunition, no way to defend himself, no way to protect his crew. But he had one weapon remaining, one final card to play: psychology. He traversed his empty guns, tracking the lead fighter with painstaking precision, following its every move, maintaining perfect targeting discipline. It was as if his weapons were fully loaded, as if he could unleash a devastating barrage of fire at any moment. The lead German pilot, his nerves already frayed by the earlier carnage, saw the twin .50 caliber machine guns tracking him, following his every move. He saw the gun barrels aligned perfectly with his cockpit, promising instant and agonizing death. He broke formation. His decision was immediate, instinctive, a hard right turn that defied all logic and training. Pure instinct overriding knowledge, years of training melting away in the face of primal fear. The guns might be empty, but the threat reaction was hardwired, ingrained in his very being. When someone aims a weapon at you, you evade. The rest of the formation, their courage wavering, followed their leader, breaking off their carefully planned attack pattern. Not because Donovan could actually shoot them, but because they believed he could. The psychological impact of his previous kills had created a phantom threat, a terrifying aura of invincibility that haunted their minds. Empty guns became as effective as loaded ones. Their reputation alone was enough to deter them. "They're breaking off!" the ball turret gunner exclaimed, his voice cracking with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "They're actually breaking off!" And they were. The German formation scattered, their pilots abandoning their attack, their courage shattered, their will to fight extinguished. They didn't regroup for another attempt. They didn't attempt to salvage the mission. They had lost 21 aircraft to this single bomber, to this single gun position. The cost was simply too high, the risk far too great. They disengaged completely, turning their aircraft towards home, flying back towards their bases, their spirits crushed and their pride wounded. They left Hell's Fury alone in the hostile airspace above Augsburg, its tail guns silent and empty, its crew battered but alive. The bomber formation continued towards its target, the aircraft factory at Augsburg. They dropped their bombs, destroying the factory and crippling the German war effort. They flew home through 3 more fighter contacts, their nerves on edge, their hearts pounding in their chests. But none of the German fighters engaged Hell's Fury. Word had spread like wildfire through German radio communications. A chilling warning passed from squadron to squadron. One B-17 with an insane tail gunner has single-handedly destroyed 21 fighters. Avoid that aircraft at all costs. Too dangerous, too costly. Hell's Fury finally landed at Framlingham at 16:47 hours, 9 hours after takeoff. Donovan climbed out of his tail gun position, his body aching, his ears ringing, but his hands were remarkably steady. There were no shakes, no visible signs of stress, just a quiet sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. The ground crew swarmed the aircraft, meticulously counting the damage. 47 bullet holes, 13 cannon strikes, a destroyed hydraulic line, a cracked rudder. But it flew. It survived. The crew chief, Murphy, examined the tail gun position, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. He checked the ammunition boxes, finding them all empty, every single round expended. He found Donovan sitting on the tarmac, calmly smoking a cigarette. "You used everything, Donovan," Murphy said, his voice still incredulous. 2,000 rounds. You fired every bullet we loaded." "Had to, Sarge," Donovan replied, exhaling a plume of smoke into the air. "Didn't have enough to waste any." "How many did he get?" Whitmore asked, approaching them. Murphy consulted his notes, comparing information gathered from other crew members, radio intercepts from German communications, and visual confirmations from escort fighters who had finally caught up with them near the target. 12 confirmed kills, sir," Murphy reported, his voice filled with admiration. 4 probables, 3 damaged. Whitmore looked at Donovan, his gaze filled with a mixture of respect and disbelief. "You destroyed 12 fighters in one mission, Donovan. 19 if you count the probables and damaged." "In 4 minutes of sustained combat," Murphy added, shaking his head in disbelief. The news of Donovan's extraordinary feat spread through the bomber group before sunset, transforming him from an unknown transfer into an instant legend. By morning, every tail gunner at Framlingham wanted to know Donovan's tactics, eager to learn the secrets of his success. By afternoon, pilots from other bomber groups were requesting briefings, eager to understand the aggressive approach that had turned the tide of battle. By evening, 8th Air Force Headquarters sent representatives to interview him, recognizing the potential impact of his revolutionary tactics. Major General Lucas Grant, commanding officer of the 8th Bomber Command, arrived personally, wanting to assess the situation firsthand. He found Donovan in the enlisted men's barracks, meticulously cleaning his guns, performing the standard maintenance required after every mission. Nothing flashy, nothing special. Anderson introduced himself, his voice formal and commanding. Donovan stood at attention, his back ramrod straight. "At ease, Sergeant," Anderson said, his expression softening slightly. "I'm here to understand what you did yesterday, Donovan. I want to know everything." "No." Donovan calmly explained his philosophy, articulating the principles that had guided his actions in the skies above Augsburg. Aggressive fire, psychological intimidation, attacking during the enemy's formation phase, exploiting moments of vulnerability before coordination solidified. Anderson listened without interruption, his gaze unwavering, his mind absorbing every detail. When Donovan finished, the general asked a single pointed question. "Can you teach this to the right men, Donovan?" Donovan paused for a moment, considering the question carefully. "Not everyone's got the temperament, sir," he replied, his voice thoughtful. "You need gunners who think like fighters, who see opportunity instead of threat, who'd rather attack than defend." "Find them, Donovan," Anderson ordered, his voice firm and decisive. "I'm authorizing a special training program. You'll develop the curriculum, select the candidates, and transform tail gunner tactics across the entire 8th Air Force. Effective immediately, you're reassigned to training command." Donovan hesitated, a flicker of reluctance crossing his face. "Sir, I prefer to stay with my crew. We've been through a lot together." "Your crew doesn't need you anymore, Donovan," Anderson said bluntly, his words leaving no room for debate. "They're alive because of what you did. Other crews are dying because their gunners don't know what you know. Which is more important, 9 men or 9,000? The answer, of course, was obvious. Donovan accepted the assignment, his duty to his country outweighing his personal preferences. He spent the next month painstakingly developing what became known as the Donovan Doctrine, a revolutionary approach to aerial combat that forever changed the way tail gunners operated. Aggressive tail gunnery. The core principles of the Donovan Doctrine were surprisingly simple, but profoundly revolutionary. First principle: seize the initiative. Don't wait for fighters to attack. Engage them during their formation phase, disrupting their coordination and forcing them to respond to your actions instead of executing their meticulously planned attack. Second principle: psychological warfare. Your first burst doesn't necessarily need to destroy the target. It needs to intimidate the entire formation, sowing seeds of doubt and hesitation. Make them cautious. Make them second-guess their approach. Make them resources. Mike Donovan taught them all that survival wasn't about hiding. It was about instilling a primal fear in the enemy, making them genuinely afraid to attack. Seemed simple enough, but that shift in perspective changed everything. The numbers, cold and irrefutable, validated everything Bailey preached. The 8th Air Force, in a meticulous analysis conducted in 1945, dissected bomber losses before and after the implementation of this aggressive gunner doctrine. From March to May 1944, the average losses amounted to a staggering 14 bombers per 1,000 sorties. But from June to August of the same year, that number plummeted to just 8 bombers per 1,000 sorties. Same targets, same formidable German defenses, yet a remarkable 43% reduction in losses. The single defining difference? Gunners who were trained to shoot first, to take the initiative, to be the aggressors. German records, painstakingly translated and analyzed after the war, revealed the enemy's perspective, painting a vivid picture of the impact Donovan's doctrine had. Luftwaffe after-action reports from the summer of 1944 consistently highlighted the unexpected aggression of American gunners. One report, dated June 1944, detailed in stark terms: American tail gunners have adopted new and concerning tactics. They are now engaging formations during the crucial approach phase with sustained and surprisingly accurate fire. The effect is undeniable. Psychological disruption of attack coordination. Recommendation: avoid direct stern approaches at all costs. Utilize high-angle diving attacks, originating from the 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock positions, to minimize exposure to the tail gunners. The recommendation, however, proved to be far more difficult to implement than it appeared on paper. High-angle diving attacks demanded a completely different style of training, a new level of intricate coordination, and a revised, more nuanced risk assessment. Many seasoned German pilots, steeped in established aerial combat traditions, simply couldn't adapt to the rapidly changing landscape of the war. Those who stubbornly tried to force the issue encountered a new breed of aggressive waist gunners, equally proficient in the new tactics. The Donovan Doctrine had permeated every defensive position on the American bombers, turning what were once perceived as vulnerable targets into deadly, bristling fortresses in the sky. By August 1944, German fighter effectiveness against American bombers had declined by an astonishing 63% compared to the levels of January 1944. While multiple factors undeniably contributed to this decline, better fighter escorts, improved bomber formation tactics, and the relentless strategic targeting of German oil production, internal Luftwaffe analysis attributed a significant 28% of the decline specifically and directly to the aggressive gunner tactics instilled by Donovan's methods. Donovan himself never knew these numbers, never saw the detailed German analysis, and never fully grasped the profound extent of his influence on the course of the war. He died in 1998, at the age of 76, a quiet and unassuming figure. His obituary in the Boston Globe, a brief and perfunctory affair, mentioned his Distinguished Service Cross, his 16 years working in construction, and his beloved wife Margaret and their 3 children. One single, unassuming paragraph mentioned his war service as a tail gunner in the 8th Air Force, noting that he developed new tactics. That paragraph, however, failed to mention his legendary 12 kills in 4 minutes, didn't mention the 300 gunners he trained, didn't mention the estimated 3,000 lives he saved, and certainly didn't mention how one South Boston street fighter single-handedly changed aerial combat doctrine for every nation that studied his methods. His funeral was a somber affair, drawing only 17 people, mostly family, a couple of old war buddies, no military honor guard, no stirring 21-gun salute, just a quiet, understated service at St. Augustine Cemetery. The priest who performed the service, a man of God but not of war, knew nothing about the events of March 6, 1944. Didn't know anything about the Donovan Doctrine. Didn't know he was burying a man who had subtly but irrevocably altered the course of aerial warfare. But the other tail gunners knew. Every veteran of the aggressive gunner training knew. They had gathered informally the night before at a dimly lit bar in South Boston, their faces etched with the memories of war. They raised glasses, told old war stories, and fondly remembered the man who taught them to shoot first and intimidate the bastards who wanted them dead. Bailey, now a weathered 74, gave the toast, his voice thick with emotion. Mike Donovan never thought he was special, just a guy doing his job. But his job saved 3,000 of us. Every bomber that made it home because German fighters broke off their attack. Every gunner who survived his tour because he learned to be aggressive instead of defensive. Every mission that succeeded because the enemy was too scared to engage. That's Mike's legacy. Not 12 kills, 12,000 lives. The Donovan Doctrine, though often unrecognized, remains standard doctrine in modern aerial combat training. Fighter pilots learn aggressive engagement principles, honing their skills to dominate the skies. Gunners on transport aircraft study psychological intimidation tactics, learning to project an aura of unwavering confidence. Even modern missile defense systems incorporate the core concept of early engagement to disrupt enemy coordination and preempt potential threats. March 6, 1944. A seemingly insignificant 4 minutes in the grand scheme of history. One tail gunner, 12 enemy fighters. But in that fleeting moment, defense became offense. Reaction became action. And one South Boston street fighter proved, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that survival doesn't come from hiding. It comes from making your enemy too scared to fight. Michael Donovan fired 2,000 rounds, destroyed 12 aircraft, saved an estimated 3,000 lives, and changed warfare forever. Not because he was inherently special, but because he refused to passively wait for death to come find him. He went hunting first, and in doing so, he redefined the rules of engagement. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us preserve these crucial histories. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We honor the courage of these men by remembering their names and sharing their stories. Thank you for keeping their memories alive.